Jason Momoa, a man forged in ocean fire and island silence, has carried kingdoms upon his shoulders and storms within his chest. The world knows him as Khal Drogo, the warlord who made millions bow before the blazing fury of Game of Thrones. The world knows him as Aquaman, the golden sovereign who rose from the depths to shatter every expectation, grossing $1.14 billion worldwide. The first DC film ever to breach that threshold. The world knows him as the embodiment of something primal and untamable, a force of nature wearing human skin, tattooed and towering and trembling with life. Yet behind that legacy lies a story not glamorous, but devastating. A story of a boy ripped from his ocean before he was old enough to understand loss. A man who bled on the floors of Hollywood's silence, who borrowed money to feed his children while the world had already forgotten his name. A father who built the most beautiful home of his life with his own trembling hands, only to watch it quietly fall apart. Before we begin, if Khal Drogo's fire or Aquaman's courage ever moved something inside you, leave a like as a tribute to the man who traded his peace, his safety, and sometimes his very body to give the world its heroes. Behind the thunder of global fame lies a cruel truth. Jason Momoa's first stage was not lit with dazzling spotlights, but with the cold silence of a child, learning that love can vanish without a goodbye. Born beneath skies painted gold over Honolulu, Hawaii, on August 1st, 1979, the boy carried the name Namakayeha, the spirit of the waves. His father, Joseph Momoa, a proud native Hawaiian artist, taught him that the world had a soul worth painting. His mother, Connie Lemke, a photographer of German, Irish, and Native American roots, showed him that beauty could exist even in stillness. They were two free spirits, luminous in love, but broken in the silence between. When Jason was still too young to remember his father's laughter, that love washed away like the tide. The boy of the islands was swept far inland, to Norwalk, Iowa, a place where nothing smelled of salt and nothing sang like the Pacific. Fields replaced waves, snow replaced surf, silence replaced song. The endless horizon stretched before him. But to Jason, endless only meant empty. He missed the warmth of his father's hand, the rhythm of the ocean that had cradled him to sleep, the particular gold of Hawaiian light on volcanic rock. His mother, brave and gentle, raised him alone, teaching him courage and kindness. Yet no lesson could fill the hollow left by absence. Some nights he wandered quiet streets, listening for voices that never came, watching other children play and feeling invisible, as if the wind itself had abandoned him. Small heartbreaks piled atop the larger void that shadowed his every waking hour. Years later, he would confess that every warrior he ever played came from that boy in Iowa, still searching for the sea. From the silence of neglect, he carved resolve. From the cold of rejection, he learned the fire of defiance. Armed with nothing but stubborn will and the bruises of a childhood spent searching, Jason Momoa took his first unsteady steps toward a destiny no one had promised him. After high school, he pursued marine biology, attempting to study the thing he missed most: the sea, the pulse of life from which he had been torn. But his soul could not be contained by textbooks or lecture halls or the patient rhythm of academic life. He wandered to Paris, learning to paint not just faces, but feelings. He traveled to Tibet, seeking silence among monks and the peace that had eluded his restless heart since childhood. Each journey was a shard of himself, a bridge over the distance between the boy he had been and the man he hoped to become. When he finally returned to Hawaii, the wind smelled like forgiveness. He touched the waters of his birth, and for the first time in years, the storm inside him stilled. He walked away from university before his final year, not out of rebellion, but out of a longing too vast for any institution to contain. Back home, he worked in a surf shop, barefoot on hot floors, selling boards to tourists who never saw the storm in his eyes. Some nights, he had no home at all, sleeping on benches near the water, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, listening to the waves that had once been his lullaby. Hunger gnawed at his ribs, exhaustion weighed on his limbs. Yet he refused to yield. Then, in 1999, fate arrived, wearing the shape of a stranger. A Japanese designer named Takeo Kikuchi noticed the tall, sun-bronzed young man stacking surfboards and offered him a chance to model. Jason laughed. He had no polished poses, no practiced charm, only the raw, untamed presence of a boy who had known hunger and cold and nights without a roof. Months later, that presence earned him the title of Model of the Year in Hawaii. To the world, it was glamour. To Jason, it was the first time destiny had whispered, "You belong." From over 1,300 hopefuls, he was cast in Baywatch Hawaii, 40 episodes, and a feature film. A mentor named Simone McKinnon guided him toward the craft he had instinctively embodied. He stumbled, fell, rose, and stumbled again, like the tide he had always carried in his chest. Roles followed. Stargate Atlantis, from 2005 to 2009, as Ronan Dex, pushed him through grueling stunts, icy water tanks, and relentless schedules that demanded every ounce of body and spirit. Each scar, each callus, each sleepless night was testimony to the boy who had once slept hungry and afraid. The boy who once felt forgotten was learning, slowly and painfully, how to become legendary. By 2010, Jason Momoa was no longer merely a survivor. He was a man daring to summon his own destiny. He founded Pride of Gypsies, not just a production company, but a declaration of sovereignty. "I was tired of waiting for permission," he would later say. "No one was going to hand me my dream. I had to build it with my own two hands." A year later, Game of Thrones handed him the role of Khal Drogo, a character made of fury, love, and tragedy. In his audition, Jason performed the haka, his body trembling with ancestral power, the room stunned into absolute silence. When the scene ended, so did his anonymity. Overnight, he became the face of strength, the embodiment of the warrior every boy wanted to be and every man feared to face. The world saw a conqueror, but behind the cameras, the truth was different. When Drogo's story ended after one season, Hollywood went cold. The studios deemed him too raw, too wild, too big for their carefully measured mold. The spotlight faded not in scandal, but in silence, which is a crueler kind of darkness. Between 2012 and 2014, roles grew scarce and income disappeared almost overnight. He later admitted he had to borrow money just to feed his family. staring at the empty hum of a refrigerator, listening to a clock tick through a small apartment, like the distant sound of waves from a home impossibly far away. The world saw a fallen star, but behind that silence was a father refusing to break. A man who had survived Iowa winters and Hollywood's cold dismissal and was not about to surrender now. He wrote, directed, and produced Road to Paloma, a film born not from wealth, but from marrow and grit, telling a story of freedom, loss, and redemption. It didn't make me rich, he said, but it made me whole. Then, in 2016, DC came calling, and the ocean, once only a metaphor for everything he had lost, became his destiny. He trained from dawn to midnight, 6 days a week, dragging chains through icy water tanks until every muscle screamed. Sleep came in fragments. Pain became ritual, and he smiled for the cameras. Hiding exhaustion beneath the grin, the world adored. When Aquaman was released in 2018, it shattered every expectation, grossing over $1 billion worldwide and earning Jason $14 million. At the world premiere, he led his cast in a thunderous Maori haka, honoring his roots and the ocean that had raised him. The crowd erupted, not just in awe, but in reverence. Power, as Jason discovered, carries a heartbreaking price. Fame, he once said softly, doesn't heal. It only makes the silence louder. When Jason Momoa first walked into that jazz bar in Hollywood in November 2008, the cameras could capture nothing of the storm that was coming. He sat with close friends after long hours on set, still relatively unknown, carrying the quiet flame of something indomitable. Somewhere in the amber-lit room, a man began to shout, his voice slurred and sharp and soaked in alcohol and pride. Jason stood, not to fight, but to calm the chaos. Hey man, it's not worth it. Someone recalled him saying, his voice flat but tired. Then a flash. Dominic Bando lunged forward with a broken glass, and fate struck in an instant. The shard tore across Jason's face, missing his left eye by less than a centimeter. 140 stitches, lying beneath the harsh white lights of a hospital room. Jason felt the world shrink to a single undeniable truth. Pain doesn't require permission. I saw my own blood, he said afterward, his voice soft as a confession. And I knew, if I survived this, I would never be afraid again. The recovery was grueling. Weeks of swollen silence, hollowed eyes staring at a ceiling. Hollywood's glow, impossibly distant. But in that quiet, his inner fire burned brighter than ever. The assailant faced 5 years in prison. Jason chose grace, refusing to exploit the incident or weaponize his pain for public sympathy. Years later, on the set of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom in 2021, fate delivered another test. He refused stunt doubles, throwing himself into every scene with full force, true to his relentless nature. Rips in shoulder muscles, eye injuries, a herniated disc that made sleep impossible. I was in so much pain I couldn't sleep, he admitted. But I promised myself, and the fans, Aquaman would never quit in the middle of the waves. Then, in July 2022, at 42 years of age, a head-on collision with a motorbike in Los Angeles. Metal, screaming, glass exploding like fractured stars. The world tilting violently in a single suspended heartbeat. He stumbled out, lungs burning, hands trembling, shaken yet miraculously unscathed. In that hollow silence after the crash, every loss he had ever endured surged back at once. The reckless blaze of youth that had scarred his face, the fractures of family, the unbearable grief of a love he could not save. Fans would come to call him the Iron Soul of the Pacific, a man who wore pain as an emblem rather than a burden, who transformed every wound into a force impossible to tame. There was a love story within all of this that the world had watched with something close to reverence. In 2005, in a small jazz bar where amber light shimmered through curling smoke, Jason Momoa first truly saw Lisa Bonet, the same woman who had haunted his childhood television, the face that had made a boy in Hawaii turn to his mother and vow, "Someday I'm going to marry her." She was 38, serene as twilight. He was 26. Fierce as the ocean he had been born from. They spoke until dawn. No walls, no armor, only two souls recognizing home in each other. She became his peace. He became her wildness. Their love blossomed in the quiet sanctuary of Topanga Canyon, far from Hollywood's relentless glare. Mornings spilled over cedar floors with sunlight. Children's laughter drifted over dewy grass like music. Lola arrived in 2007, his little bird of light, followed by Nakoa Wolf a year later, the warrior of the storm. In 2017, under ancient oaks, they finally married. No press, no fanfare. Just two souls honoring a decades-old promise. She wore sand-colored linen. He let his hair flow freely. "Lisa is my home," Jason would say. "When I was lost, she was where I found peace." But the spotlight that once crowned him hero became a cage as his career soared with Aquaman. The rhythm that had held them together began to falter. Mornings that once smelled of cedar and brewed coffee became silent. Dinners turned into separate meals in separate rooms. Lola's laughter grew distant. Nakoa Wolf told his mother quietly, "It feels like the house is too big now, like it swallowed him." By 2020, in the hush of the pandemic, they realized the silence between them had changed into something neither could mend. She found meaning in stillness. He found purpose in motion. We were learning different songs, Jason would later admit. And sometimes, love isn't about keeping the music alive. It's about knowing when to stop the dance. In January 2022, they released a joint statement. "We free each other." They wrote, "To become the people we are learning to be. No anger, no bitterness, only the courage that allows love to depart with dignity." When their divorce was finalized in January 2023, there were no lawsuits, no battles, only the measured distance of respect. "I still see her in everything that brings me peace," Jason reflected quietly. "The ocean, my children, the silence. At the end of the day, love doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. Some stories aren't meant to end in thunder. They end in silence, the kind that lingers like the sea after a storm." In 2026, Jason Momoa stands not as the unshakable warrior the world once believed him to be, but as something rarer and more honest. A man acquainted with his own fragility, who chose to keep moving anyway. He lives alongside his children. Nakoa Wolf, now 17, and Lola Iolani, 18. whose laughter echoes through his California estate and across the windswept shores of Hawaii. They paddle together at dawn, collect ocean debris on morning walks, and explore trails where pine mingles with the salt of the sea. His partner, Adria Arjona, moves through this family rhythm as both anchor and compass, her calm presence tempering years of accumulated storms. His estimated net worth of approximately $10 million is expressed not in ostentation, but in intention. Multiple Harley Davidsons. A vintage 1955 pink Cadillac named Bernadette. His eco-conscious Mananalu water brand. Craft beer collaborations with Guinness. And sustainable fashion lines built from the belief that beauty and responsibility can share the same space. His primary California estate, valued at approximately $3.5 million, floods with sunlight through spaces adorned with ocean-inspired art and carved wood and lush tropical plants. He has contributed and raised millions for ocean conservation, disaster relief, and children's education, often bringing his own children into the work, modeling stewardship as naturally as laughter. He plays guitar, ukulele, drums, and bass, letting music fill the rooms that silence once hollowed out. His body tells a story now, scars from childhood, from accidents, from decades of grueling training and ice tanks and collisions with a world that never made it easy. His face, lined by sunlight and lived experience, and the particular weight of loving deeply and losing anyway, radiates something that fame alone can never manufacture, the kind of depth that only comes from enduring everything and choosing, every morning, to remain. Every wave that rises must one day break. Jason Momoa has broken more than once. He has bled on floors, borrowed money to buy groceries, wept on Hawaiian shores for brothers lost, and handed over the home he loved most in the world. And every time, the same sea that brought him down has carried him home again. Not toward fame, toward freedom. Not toward the roar of crowds, toward the sound of his children's laughter and the hum of a road stretching endlessly ahead. Salt in the air, the ocean always waiting.